whenever a new technology comes along, a lot of people at first have a knee-jerk reaction. They say the old thing is going away, chat is dead. In fact, while I was asking some of the LLMs themselves to critique my presentation, the first thing that they did, that Perplexity and Claude did, was shout, chat is dead, chat is dying. You should make your presentation say that. But it's just not true. For anybody who might feel short on time, here's my whole talk in about 5 seconds. We started with this. Now this is going away. Chat is dead. The end. Just kidding. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Chat is still vital, but it's part of a growing toolbox, and it's showing no signs of going away. I don't think it's going to go away altogether. The tendency with our technologies is that most of them don't tend to go away. They tend to be augmented as new technologies evolve. Just like we didn't stop using our feet back in ancient days when we invented wheels. And just as wheels didn't go away when we invented boats and planes, with each of those things, we use our feet a lot less for things that we use other technologies for. The same thing is with chat. And the use of when we walk or use wheels is more specialized. I'm going to go over the evolution of where chat has gone and where it's likely to be going, some challenges along the way, and then from there to making it work. And I'll bring to bear a couple of frameworks and some tools and lenses that I think will help us as designers in our increasingly important roles in helping to shepherd this future and make it a more humane future as AI continues to create a sea change. In terms of the evolution, this is a chart which shows at a glance where UI has gone and how people communicating with machines since the dawn of the digital era. And as you can see, like I said, most of these things, some of them do go away altogether, but it tends to be not just taking slices of a pie. The pie grows and the uses of things. We still use keyboards, right? We still use mouses for some things. And the same thing I think will happen with chat. But basically, we've gone through this early age of command line, so GUIs and WIMP interfaces. And then so what some folks call NUIs, which involves more conversational interactions as well as more sensor-based embedded interactions where machines know more context. But one of the evolutions that we're seeing happen now is that chat is definitely taking a step back. These are images from Luke Wroblewski talking about how in the beginning of the AI era, in ancient history back a couple of years ago, most of the AI chatbots dominated everything. And it was always like a single screen. There'd be a user message, and then a response from the system, and there would be a user input box at the bottom. And we still see this all over the place. And that's fine. And the conversation, it tends to echo what instant messenger was like between humans. But just like with the evolution of the wheel, once you have a wheel, then using your feet doesn't make sense as much, and it starts to feel like overkill. The same thing is starting to happen with this. And so over time, these are some visualizations of Bench.io, which is one of the tools that Wroblewski worked on. And over the years, it started with 100% chat UI, but increasingly, you see more and more real estate devoted to the actual artifacts or to what's being worked on. But chat still stays there. There's still some conversation going on, but it tends to take less and less of the real estate. And it varies very much from context to context too. And so this is a good roundup from Shrang Sharma of how we've gone from ELIZA, which was ancient history in the 70s, maybe the first simulated AI conversation agent that we're all probably pretty familiar with. But now it's become a little bit more nuanced, where chat still appears, but it's a little bit more sophisticated or urbane. It steps out of the way. It doesn't scream as much and demand as much of the real estate. You have more inline overlays in some places, panels that go off to the side, or even can be shifted around by the users, grids that can take up space, just like other elements of our tools. More appropriate uses of space that are more tools for the job, that are more customized to context. One of the things that we're seeing beyond just simple chat, it's really proving itself to be a very useful UI metaphor, but it's not really that new, is the infinite canvas. We all use it probably every day with Figma, but back in 2007, this was something called Yahoo Pipes, which was a popular and very fun, different sort of tool and framework for putting together interactions with a computer. And basically, you could use this for carving out data feeds and data transformations, working with news feeds and Usenet feeds. You could use these boxes and nodes on an infinite canvas that would have transformations showed as links between each of them. That's really coming into play now. In 2025, you see a lot of things like this. This is a beautiful agentic workflow tool that uses infinite canvas. It looks a lot like pipes in terms of the basic structure, but it's much more modern. And one of the things that textual chat traditionally has a hard time with is the fact that many things can be branching off or working in parallel. So as you can see here, having an infinite canvas can hide away some of those conversations and some of those single threads of things that are going on, but let you zoom in or out of them and see the whole system. You can zoom out to see the whole context, but go into the system and also make adjustments as the user. This is a great way to orchestrate what agents are doing and what AI is doing. Flowwise was the name of that tool. This is a similar infinite canvas tool called Flora, which is for image transformations and working with imagery and video. And you can plug in different tools and transformations and even different LLMs. You can use this as a framework to present different base tools, different image transformers, as well as different humans collaborating. Similarly to the way you do in FigJam, you see there's different people's names there, and people can chat with each other as well as with agents and with processes. And you can have AI processes as well as deterministic processes that are just traditional software doing transformations, more like what you saw in the Yahoo Pipes example there. So again, we still have chat going on in every one of these things, but it becomes part of the orchestra. It's not just the only tool for the job. This is great where this is going, but there are definitely some challenges along the way. And the biggest one is the affordances and risks in chat. And any of these, even an infinite canvas, can help us see more of the affordances and risks. But still, it can be opaque, especially for people who are not technical, who are the consumers we build for and design for. It's hard for them to see what they can do. And if you don't know what you can do with a tool, having just a blank text box can feel really overwhelming. Also, you can miss a lot of the opportunities that are open to you. And some tasks are easier to do than to explain. Part of Fei-Fei Li and some of the other godmothers and godfathers of AI at the height of the industry are talking about the next big transformation phase being AI being able to pick up context from the world through sensors that are out in the world and through just like children when they're learning, they watch us, they watch parents, and they watch other people doing things. Yeah, it's a lot easier for them to learn the context and interact effectively through that than for us to try to describe and type to them what's going on. So that's still emerging, but that's something that as designers, we definitely need to keep in mind. Ethan Malik has a great framework and way of breaking this down. With AI capabilities, there's a very strange pattern that we see. There's a lot of things that are changing and hard to keep track of, but one pattern or anti-pattern that seems to stand the test of time is this thing that he calls the jagged frontier. And what that means is even with experts, AI experts, machine learning experts, humans are continually surprised by the capabilities of AI, surprised by both the positives and the negatives. There's many things that fall outside of the frontier, meaning it surprises people that they don't expect the AI to be able to do this. Be able to speak any language really quickly and really well, or make these photorealistic representations of humans and of animals. But then there's famously things that people would expect it to be able to do easily, like early LLMs couldn't count the number of letters in a sentence, but they could do much more complicated things, right? They could explain E equals MC squared, but they couldn't multiply numbers. They could count the people in a story, but they couldn't count the words in a paragraph. There's some things that AI is just weaker at than traditional software. But that's actually getting better. In a lot of ways that's getting better is that we're learning to see AI as just part of the picture and to piece it together with deterministic software, which is stronger at certain things, and to let it use tools, as well as to piece it together with people. And mostly there's challenges with trust and explainability, as well as with error handling and reliability, and even being able to track what it's doing behind the scenes to predict errors and bias as well. So these are all challenges that we need to face. There's definitely a lot of work for designers. I think that's one of the things that people tend to overstate is that design is going away or UIs are going to disappear. We don't need to have humans designing UIs anymore. I think our work is as important as ever. And there's just a couple of frameworks and lenses to help us face these challenges that I find useful, and I hope you will too. One of these frameworks is pace layers. Stuart Brand, decades ago, this was from the world of architecture and urban planning, not software, but his work has been expanded to software. The original vision was that it's called sharing layers, thinking about buildings. Just like we think about software as something that we build and that people use, buildings are obviously like that too. But thinking of buildings in terms of the different layers that go into a building and thinking of the layers in terms of speed and pace of change. The slowest and most strategic and foundational layer is the site that the building is on. That doesn't change very much over hundreds of years. But as you go up to structure to skin, all the way to stuff might move from day to day. It's like people who are in the house and where bags are. And space plan is the layer that's a little bit slower than that. So maybe furniture and the walls between rooms can be easily knocked down or taken up. And that tends to happen over the life of a building. But to think of which pieces of the successful building fall into each of these layers helps you manage for the successful future evolution of the building to the needs of the people within it. So in other words, you can structure things so that services can be switched out easily. When there's an evolution, you no longer need twisted pair landline telephones as much, but maybe you need new fiber optic internet wiring to come. So if you design a building so that the services can be accessed more easily, that can lead to the success of the building. And similarly to software, if we think of things in terms of the pace of change and the friction between these different layers that change at different paces, Stuart Brand expanded this to pace layers, which is thinking not about buildings, but about society overall, starting with nature, which moves very slowly. Fashion and art is the fastest moving and craziest, least predictable layer. And in between, there's these other layers. To break things down in terms of these layers can help us successfully, and also in particular, to think about the boundaries between these layers where they shear up against each other. That's where there's potential for systemic failures to happen, but that's also the places where new opportunities tend to arise if you're cognizant of them. You think of it in terms of that. Jesse James Garrett had a similar framework, although this was specific to UX. It was called the Elements of UX. And it was talking not so much about pace of change, though. This was from more strategic levels to more surface levels of design of a website or an app. From strategy all the way up to surface level, which is the UI that the people are working with. And in between, there's layers like information design and information architecture. In each of them, the strategy moves the slowest. Information architecture might change every couple of years. The surface design, new sorts of UI widgets and so on can evolve and change on the order of weeks. In terms of the era of AI, similarly, we can think of things in terms of this strategy, scope, skeleton, skin, and sessions is very similar to what we saw before. But the really thing here is the sessions layer in which there's no human involved. That describes the interactions that an LLM or an image editing agent or a tool, that's where every time there's a single agent or a single AI that's interacting with a single customer or user, it's very unpredictable. Sometimes it's uncomfortably, to us as designers, unpredictable because we're used to prescribing flows, having set rigid flows for websites and mobile apps where you design screens. Yes, you design components and so on, but they go into screens and here's a sign up flow. And before it ever ships, I, as a designer, can look in Figma and see step by step what's going to happen, how it's going to work. There's not many surprises. But we don't have the luxury of that with AI because, as we know, in the sessions level, there's no human involved. It can move on the order of seconds or milliseconds. And so this breaks down to, again, at the session level, that's the real-time interaction. The skin, though, is the level below that, which is where we can provide the UI components and the design libraries and the patterns, these Lego pieces of UI that the AI can draw from to piece together the sessions on the fly. Services is another new layer that acts like the others, but it also intersects with the others, and it's variable. This is the other new thing. It moves from moderately slow to moderately fast, and that's all based on the rapidly evolving AI capabilities and the newly emerging capabilities of the models and the integrations and the agents and the evaluation frameworks and pipelines of data that we're building all this stuff on. And it intersects with several of these other layers. Long story short, think in particular about how sessions and services might surprise us. These are new things that we haven't had to think about before, these layers, but also they are served by what we build. The humans get more involved at the slower moving layers, which is skin, skeleton, scope, and strategy. The other framework that ties into this that I think might be of help to us here is to think of this in terms of improv comedy, improv theater. There's certain rules that people follow that allows for a lot of on-the-fly piecing together of experience. And we can think of what the AI is doing is almost the AI is like the improv actors. That's the fastest session layer, is what happens in one show on stage. It's unpredictable. It's very different from moment to moment and night to night, but it is the same in some ways too. And the ways that it's the same it's based on things like the rules that are provided, the rules of engagement. And that's similar to the slower layers and AI-based layers of strategy and scope and skeleton. And with some improv, a lot of improv, there's no props or there's just imaginary props that sometimes can be provided by the audience. Like the improv actors can say, help me think of a tool, right? Or help me think of a food. And the audience shouts out a food and they say, okay, carrots. Now carrots becomes an invisible prop that they're actually having to build a show around or a comedy act around. But sometimes there's actually a box of physical props that they work with each night. And if you think of designing not just the individual session, but designing a show like Upright Citizens Brigade, it's a troupe and a show that's gone on for decades. New people come in, new people come out, just like new AI sessions start and stop. Every night there's different sessions, but there's certain things that don't change. And that includes the props that we can have to the things, to the actors, the stage, the location of the stage, how well designed it is, how well the acoustic design is, how comfortable the lighting is, so that the audience can feel like it's an intimate experience with the actors versus it's not, or like they have to shout to be heard and they can't hear very well. All of these things are similar to the information architecture layer or the skeleton layer of AI-based layers of the systems we build. But again, the performance is the sessions layer. So if we think of this as if we are the stage managers and the people who designed Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, the physical space that it happens in, as well as the guardrails that we provide to the actors when we train them, we always say yes, and you don't ever contradict when somebody else says, things like that. Think of designing AI services in terms of improv. What we want to do as designers and as a business is to support those actors and those audiences that they serve every night, because you won't be there. You won't be able to control exactly what they do, but you can provide them the best possible prompts to get the job done. You can design the stage or the setting to get things done just the right way. You can provide the context, which these are all key things that we have within our power with AI, but we have to let go of the control. We no longer can script out exactly what the AI is going to do with every performance. And that's a great thing too, because that would be so boring, right? It's no longer that you have to just go through set flows, but the users, the people can have more control over how things unfold. So these are some key rules of the improv. You always say yes and, whether it's agents, multiple agents working with each other to serve an audience, like a troupe that's on stage, or if it's just one actor who's on stage interacting with the audience. They never contradict one another directly. They're told to always say yes and be positive about it. That's similar to progressive disclosure with one of our core UI rules. You never want to just block what somebody says, and you never want to overwhelm them. You just show a little piece at a time to help them get the job done. Similar, support your partner. You always want to collaborate. This is something we need to think of in terms of not just human to agent, but also what are the rules of engagement from agent to agent and between the agent and the designer and the business. So in terms of the human to agent, this gets down to the design library and design patterns, as well as evals too, the way that we measure what the agent is doing with many users and many sessions. 3 key takeaways. Chat is still vital, but it's part of a growing toolbox. It's not going away. We didn't stop using our feet as we evolved to new tools and technologies like cars and horses and planes, trains, and automobiles. But we use our feet not for every single job anymore. Always think about how can we design the stage and support the performance. We can't control the performance anymore, but what is it that we need to provide in terms of context, guardrails, and props to support what's happening at that sessions layer? Friction reveals opportunity. In terms of the pace layers, wherever there's 2 different layers that operate at different speeds, where they rub up against each other, that's where risk is. So we should keep a close eye on it to predict any potential problems. For instance, if an agent is asked in a session to help a user do something to do with setting dates, set up a trip, and if the user says, I want to go on a trip, help me plan going home for Thanksgiving. For the agents, it'd have to say in text, what dates are you thinking about in the text chat? It's much better if we can provide a widget in a design library with components, with tokens that determine the colors and the style and the spacing that fits the experience, that shows a calendar visualization. And it provides the usage rules about how the agent should present that to the user. There's friction and a problem can initially emerge if you haven't provided that calendar picker. But if we're monitoring the system correctly, we as designers can be revealed to us and we can know to design this date picker. So that's why the feedback loops are really important. Keep an eye on where those friction points are, because that's where the risk is for things to break down, but also the opportunity to build new advantages. So in conclusion, the future is not about chatbots or GUIs or agents or deterministic software or probabilistic AI, or even about creativity. But the future that we can evolve here and carve out is about all of the above. And it's our opportunity and our duty as designers and as design researchers to bring that together and to orchestrate how all of these things interact. It's much more complicated. There's a much bigger cast of characters than there used to be. There's a lot less control that we have over the surface level than ever before. But that's also exciting because there's a lot of new opportunity. That's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Sean. Everyone, please put your questions in the chat.
Okay. Can you speak to building design systems that are optimized for AI? Certainly. I would say look into MCP, the MCP Model Context Protocol, which is a system, and especially look at this kind of primordial use of it that Figma is providing. I played with that. This is definitely at a primitive stage still, but what MCP is, Model Context Protocol, is it's a standardized protocol. I think it was Perplexity launched this, but a lot of the big players adopted it quickly. I think MCP or something like that will definitely become a widely used thing. And what it is a standard language for tools to advertise. Like, for instance, Figma. You can set up an MCP server in Figma. What that means is you open Figma on your machine, and you can have other tools opened up on your machine, like Cursor, for instance. If you're working with Cursor to vibe code a new application, you can go into your design system that's stored within Figma, and you can share certain parts of the design system. Or you can open up a frame, a page within Figma. And instead of giving a screenshot of that page or a screenshot of that component to Cursor or to Claude, to Codex, or to any of these coding tools, instead of trying to copy and paste CSS, certain bits of CSS, you can share an entire element of that. And essentially anything that a developer can see in dev mode, looking at anything that you've selected in Figma, instantly becomes shared to and available to the AI tool that you're working with. And so if I'm working with Claude Code and I say, please look at what I've selected in Figma right now, Claude Code can instantly see that. So I can highlight elements in my design library and say, please make the button look like this. Please make that happen in this live code base that you're making. Like I say, it's very primitive though still, because you have to, it feels like very heavy lifting. You could just share a little bit at a time. But we should carve out a future where we can package up an entire design system, including with usage notes that are not just human readable usage notes, but that make it clear what the intention for every bit and piece within your design system is for the tools. How important do I think writing evals will be? Reed Snyder says. I think that's very critical, super important, super critical. That's one of the key pieces. That's something that I'm still trying to learn about. But essentially, what evals are is it's how we measure success or failure of the AI tools that we build, and it's hard coded. It's measuring what are the outcomes that we want, what are the constraints that we want, and without the evals, we have no real. And we work with the engineers and the researchers to work with the AI to measure how well our designs are doing. And that feedback loop is critical because it's not even so much that we're designing an app or software in the way that we used to, where you carve out some hard coded flows and then you hand it off to a developer, the developer develops it and then puts it up on production. It's more akin to gardening or to evolving an organism, right? There's unexpected things that this thing may do, but we need to create those guardrails around it and to prune it where necessary and to keep an eye on the unexpected places where it's going to grow and evolve it that way. It's more like carving something out than building something from scratch. So without evals or something like that, you can't do that. You can't accomplish that. Let's see, what's being beyond chat UI like for immersive environments? The world is an immersive environment. And I think just based on what the biggest thought leaders on the more technical side of AI, like Fei-Fei Li talk about, and Jan LeCun, that where this is going next is up until this point, we have been providing context to the AI in terms of pre-training, as well as post-training and adjusting weights. And that's where the context comes to it. Like you give it all this data, or you give it synthetic data or real world data, or you do human reinforcement. But there's this new horizon, which is putting sensors out in the world that the AI can interact with. And that's more akin to the way a human being or an animal learns childhood. They go out into the real world and they can see and hear what's going on around them. They can see and hear what works. And that's a much bigger, instead of a tiny trickle of context, it's an entire world of context. And I don't even know, like I'm still trying to think of frameworks to wrap my brain around that and how we will work with that as designers, but it's an exciting space. What parts of a design system make sense to delegate to Gen AI? Or is it critical to keep human designer control to preserve consistency and brand uniqueness? I think so much else with AI. It's a good question. There's no simple answer, but so much else. If you're writing something or if you're creating something from scratch, especially if you're not an expert in the domain, I think what seems to work best, even if you're like, let's say just keep it to the realm of writing, if you're writing an essay, because I think we've all probably done that with AI. I played around with having the AI come up with ideas and then sketch out an outline for a thing. And that tends to have a lot more mixed results than if I start with the idea myself and the intention and think of the outcome and maybe a basic structure to it, and then go to the AI and have the AI fill in either critique what's there and point out missing pieces, or to say this little bit can be improved, or to say this thing is missing, or to do some of the drudgery where it's okay, I already know what it's like to have to build every hover state of a button. Look at the other button structures out there and make hover states for this core button of one state that I've made. But also, I think human review is important. Even if you have an AI you make the one state of the button and you have it do all the other states, you should review that. You should review every one of those tokens that it comes up with before it's published. And especially for documentation, the documentation can go awry if you don't review it. Let's see. What are some visual patterns that you might speculate will emerge for users working with AI? I'm not sure what you mean by visual, like visual design patterns, but I think the visual design patterns, it's similar to the way brand design and visual design and look and feel and voice, those are important human elements of any brand system and design system. And I think for now, I think humans are still the best at doing that. I think, again, a lot of the drudgery, a lot of the details, once you get a core system in place of a visual design and have a system of design and look and feel, then having that adapted to different breakpoints and contexts and print versus digital and so on, a lot of those details, once you give it the core pieces, that can speed up our work because the human can give a few examples of core use cases and pieces, and more of the edge casey, corner casey parts of a visual system the AI might be able to build. How do you recommend dealing with an AI who is an inconsistent actor, sometimes really great and sometimes really bad in terms of guardrails? I think that's where the performance review with the actor, it's after the performance, you go to the actor. I don't know. I've never been in an improv troupe, but presumably after each performance, they have crits and retros. And so similar, that's where evals come in. That's where evals come in, as well as human feedback, like the thumbs up and thumbs down, just like in deterministic systems. The feedback loops are really important. And that's how you start to recognize the inconsistency. First of all, it's important that we, as the staffers and the designers and the business, the humans in the business, understand that an actor is being inconsistent and sometimes great, sometimes bad. It's easy for that to become invisible to us. And that's the danger, because at the sessions level, again, we cannot control every single session or see every single session. It's just too fast moving for the humans on the staff to know about it. But that's why we need to build these evals and these other mechanisms to feedback instances of what's going right and what's going wrong. So once we're aware of an actor being inconsistent or having certain things that go wrong and certain things that go right, you want to know that's happening before you can start to take measures to adjust weights and provide new design library tokens and tools and components that give them the props they need to do a better job and to amplify the good performance elements. How to model the flow and debug it, especially for weird edge cases, detection and hallucinations and strange depths. Any methodology. Yeah, that's a very broad question. I think there's like hallucinations, they're always going to happen. And I think the machine learning, like the researchers and the engineers, machine learning engineers are working on that, and their hallucinations are improving. But I think on the design side, the main work we can do to improve that is to encourage those feedback loops and take part in the evals, get the experts at whatever, the domain experts at whatever domain you're building tools in, to come in and help to define the evals, help to define, again, what success looks like, what are the biggest risks if something goes wrong, make sure that we know what to look for and that we're measuring that. Another thing is, as designers, we can continue to communicate to the audience that this is not deterministic software. You're not going to get the same result every single time you run this thing. Sometimes it's going to make mistakes. You should take it with a grain of salt. We need to communicate those lessons, just like critical reading of information on social media and being aware of the fact that there's misinformation and disinformation out there. And people should be educated about that. We should educate everybody out in the world of the nature of these new probabilistic systems, these AI systems, that they do hallucinate. They sometimes make mistakes. So we're not going to eliminate all those errors and those risks. But if we make people more aware of them and make people more critical readers and critical users, that will reduce the bad outcomes from it. When there is an LLM that's specifically trained on UX heuristics, best practices, and not combining UX with AI, then I'll be scared of losing my job. I see. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna, Paulette, I think you're safe. I think that our jobs are more important than ever. I don't see, just like I don't see text going away, at least verbally, like we're still going to continue to have conversations, either typing or talking or both. I don't think defining UX heuristics and best practices, for instance, that's going to continue to fall on humans. As new capabilities come out and that we never dreamt of before, and new superpowers emerge, new responsibilities emerge, and new risks emerge. And we need to continue to, we'll always need humans, at least for the near future, as far as I can see. I don't believe AGI is going to be a thing. I think that's a religious belief. And it may be a thing, but there's no evidence that suggests that that the machines will be able to do all of these things. I think we'll still need humans to help to carve out those UX heuristics and best practices. Genu asks, I used to do a lot of UX research on chatbots. I remember doing a contextual inquiry on the chatbot building process and the challenge for non-technical people. Add dialogue by messing with the tool. I'm not sure I follow that. I used to make conversation maps in one of my early roles at a startup where I was doing UX writing without realizing it at the time. I had to think about the information, architecture, tone, and word choice per chat level. Writing's an underrated skill. I agree. I'm a weird designer in the sense that I almost always start with language before I sketch. I think of words. I used to be a writer. I was a journalist back in ancient history before I started as a designer and a design researcher. It's no surprise to me that after decades and decades of machine learning and artificial intelligence work, the first big breakthrough to come along was with LLMs. And what's the second L in LLMs? It's language. That's where the first breakthrough came through. And I think language is at the core of this. Genu, I think, continuing to do that, to work on chatbots, contextual inquiry around them will continue to be a needed skill. Stephanie Westnedge says, I think we all need to be strategic and think holistically and continually advocate for users' transparency and safety. Couldn't agree more. All right. Anything else? Any other questions? We're down to the last minute. What would be a strong thing to have in the CV regarding AI? What do you think would be needed in the moment and the near future? Curiosity. I think excitement and curiosity about all this new weird stuff. And I don't know. I think it's really exciting. I think all of this stuff, I felt like UX in digital design, in digital product, was almost getting to a point where it was a little boring and a little bit drudgery-ish. In the social media era, it just became, we're doing the same thing every day. Now it's so weird and it's so unpredictable and exciting. So I think curiosity around that, continuing to try to keep on top of the new technologies as they emerge. There's so much greenfield out there now. There's so much that we can get involved with early on if you are curious about it.